The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and help me welcome Bill O'Brien, the former Speaker of the House in 2011 and 2012.
Right.
Very good. Back again in there for fighting for Ward 9, right?
I am. I'm running for state representative again. I put 5 terms in, but this is a new district for me. I've been off a couple of terms because whether or not we formally have it, I think any state representative always ought to keep in mind that you've been up there for a while, and now it's time to go and kind of rejuvenate your thoughts on issues. Hopefully do what I did, start a company and see how politics works, not just from the elected official perspective, but from the recipient of all their acts.
And we have to welcome you in Nashua, too. You had to move from...
Well, I did, yeah. I decided, like a lot of folks, that plowing a 700-foot driveway, in my case, was something I just didn't care to do for longer. And so we looked around and came, obviously no Nashua, but came across an opportunity to live in Nashua and in Ward 9 and up in Sky Meadow, as a matter of fact. And thought, this is just delightful. This is just what we've been looking for. And it's been a great move. The nice thing about Mount Vernon, it was a small town, and we really enjoy getting to know people really well there. The not so nice thing is if you wanted to go to, get your groceries, you had to drive a half hour, and if you wanted to, pop down the store to get anything, or go get some coffee, it was a trek. So it's nice being among all these services, and Sky Meadow itself is just a really great place to live. A lot of good neighbors there.
Yeah.
We're enjoying it.
Well, you got a big job. You have to oust one of at least one of the 3 Republicans, the Democrats that are there. Well,
this shouldn't be a hard thing to do. I would think that in this election, particularly where politics is so much in front of us on the national level and the state level, that people are going to be attentive. And if they're attentive to the current Democrat incumbents, they're going to come across folks that have done the ridiculous. They've done things like voted to ban wood stoves in New Hampshire. They've done the seriously disruptive. They voted a law that would have put $168 million income tax on the people of New Hampshire. It would have been new. We've avoided sales taxes, income tax. That choice has been a good one over the years. Even during this time of the virus pandemic, we have the strongest economy in the Northeast. Right. We're not suffering the same degree of unemployment that other economies have. If you look at all the indicia of social health, comparing New Hampshire, not just in the Northeast, but it is a good comparison, but across the country, we have one of the richest states. We have one of the healthiest states. Our kids are growing up in intact families more than in other states. Our median income is high. You look at all these things that demographers will look at and say, is this a healthy society? Is this not? And New Hampshire ranks very, very high. Our violence crime is very low, And I have to say that that's because we have had in the past an attitude among all the voters that the least amount of government is the best amount of government. And if people can do for themselves, they should do for themselves. And if they can do through their local governments, then they should do through their local governments. And only when it becomes absolutely necessary should we move up to the state level. That's why I'm running, because the current representatives have made different choices. They've chosen to grow government. They've chosen to enact more regulations. And that's just not the direction that I think New Hampshire needs and the people in Nashua need.
Well, that's what you found when you became Speaker in 2011, that they had a big shortfall of the budget, and that you were able to come out with a budget that was balanced and it made up for that shortfall.
Carl, I think you were there the term before I became Speaker along with me, and you might remember that every time they would enact a new tax
Right.
or a new fee on the people of New Hampshire, and in the end, they became pretty distracted by that. I would
Right.
always go up and say, "This is tax number 79 this term," and I think we got it up to, correct me if I'm wrong, 84 separate taxes and fees.
It was in that name.
And despite all that additional taxing, what happened was that when the economy turns down, as it always does, it's not something that is a linear progression all the time. It dips and it grows,
A little
and
roller
so
coaster
forth. And we
sometime.
had a little bit of a recession. Nationally, it's a pretty big one. New Hampshire, as always, did a little bit better back in 2008, 2009, 2010. The drop in revenues resulted in a $1 billion deficit. They taxed us more. If you remember, they added a huge amount on the surcharge and motor vehicle registration fee. And so we came and we said, we're not going to cover that almost $1 billion shortfall, just steady spending and revenue coming in. There was about almost $1 billion shortfall. And by the way, we're going to give people back that motor vehicle surcharge, another $80 or $90 million out of their pocket. And we were able to do that, I think, very comfortably by looking at government. And this is what we need to do now. Again, we have to look at government and say, at this level of government, what does it have to do? What does it have to do? And at this level of government, what has it been doing that we have to start to wind down, but you can't take away because people become dependent on it? And then what is the absolute ridiculous things that it's doing? And we came up with a surprising amount of the third category, enough so that not only did we not have to increase any taxes, but as I said, we were able to give back that surcharge, motor vehicle registration surcharge. We were able to reduce 13 additional taxes. And the result was that the economy in New Hampshire, as always, took off in a much stronger way than the rest of its sister states in New England, and indeed throughout the nation. And with those tax savings, as a result of the surpluses we started growing, we were then able to turn in subsequent legislative terms and start reducing the business tax. When I became Speaker, we had, I think it was in the top 5 when it came to business taxes. That was the kind of the weak underbelly of New Hampshire. Personal taxes weren't too bad, but the two areas we had to work on were property taxes. We had to work on business taxes, and we started this process to reduce business taxes, and we were able to bring it down to the lower half compared to all the other states in the country. Again, that added to jobs here in New Hampshire. Up until COVID came along, we had historically low unemployment rates, historically high business formation rates, and we know how to produce that. We have to have people that want to go up there and produce it. Not like the three folks who are running as incumbents in Ward 9, who all of whom not only voted for income tax, they voted for a 12.5% increase in business taxes. Taxes on the small businesses, because New Hampshire's a state of small businesses that give all of us our jobs.
Right. They're the ones that just drop out of the business area.
Yeah. And so I looked at that. When I left after 5 terms, I'd been 10 years as state representative, and as you know, it's a volunteer position. You don't get anything for it, $100 a year or something, which we'd always donate to something anyway.
And they even take taxes out of that.
Yeah, then you take out of the 100, we'd get like $86 or I don't know what it was, and then we'd sign over the check to some charity or another, and when I left, I said, I've done it. This is civic duty. It's like, a lot of people in New Hampshire do volunteer work. They'll join a school board. They'll join a board of aldermen for a while. They'll join a informal committee to advise various portions of the government. That's how New Hampshire works, a volunteer government. And so I figure, well, I've done it. Let somebody else get up there. They might have some ideas. But I'm looking at just the madness that's going on in the state, and it reflects this craziness that's going on in the country. And it reflects it in very, very startling ways. The last House session, the New Hampshire House of Representatives has been meeting over at the Whittemore Center in UNH so they can have social distancing. Right. The last House session, we were faced with something I thought I would never see in New Hampshire. There were Democrat state representatives who, when the time came to pledge allegiance, the time came for our national anthem, took a knee, showed disrespect. My dad was a member of the Greatest Generation. He joined the military. He was going to Northeastern, dropped out of Northeastern, joined the military 2 months after Pearl Harbor. Did well. He ended up going to officer candidate school, ended up retiring as a colonel. Put 30 years in. He was in World War II. He was in the Korean War. He was in Vietnam. 2 months. The war started in World War II started 2 months before he joined, and he got out 2 months after he got back from Vietnam. I see someone taking their knee as showing disrespect to my father and to that generation and to the current young people, the best of our country, who are selfishly putting their lives on the line to keep us free. And this is the disrespect. Last year, I think it was, I went to the Army-Navy game down in Philadelphia, the football game. Yeah. And you contrast the rioters and these people that call themselves Antifa for anti-fascists, but they are the fascists. They're the shock troops of the radical left of the Democrat Party. They're the violent shock troops. Just as in the 1920s, the shock troops of the Democrat Party was the Ku Klux Klan. These are the current shock troops. And you look at those people and then you compare them with these midshipmen and these cadets. And you got to do that at times because it's heartening. You say, my country still has a future.
No, it's a shame that the younger people, I guess, in a way, are the ones that don't see anything about our history and how we built up this great country. Went through lots of changes, and we got better each time.
Let us be clear with what is happening. We've seen it over the last week, and it's developed out of sight in our schools, and now the result of it's becoming evident. What is happening is that people are being denied information. They're being given false narratives. Our kids graduate from high school, now even college, not knowing who America is. I was listening to this interview with Victor Davis Hanson, who is a well-known historian. He's at the Hoover Institute, which is part of Stanford University. He's a professor at Hillsdale College. He's published probably about 20 different books on history. He's an acknowledged expert in the country on Greek history. And he said, recently, and for him, he's 65, 70. He said, recently, when I asked kids, what do you know about World War II? He said, often they don't know what side the United States fought on in World War II. They don't know what the issues were. Oh. He said, he'll ask them, well, what do you know? And he'll say, well, we know the Holocaust. And, in the interview, he was saying, well, that's kind of good. They know the Holocaust. Tell me about the Holocaust. Oh, yeah, America imprisoned some Japanese American citizens. And, oh, by the way, we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that's all they know. Yeah. That's all they know. They don't know about the reasons that the United States
that
and
war?
Britain had to stand up to these totalitarian regimes. They don't know the sacrifice of their fathers. They don't know that America's position in the world was that no matter who was fighting it, when the time came for war to end, they wanted the Americans to end the war. There's often a question, why did the Germans keep on fighting on in World War II? When it became evident in the beginning, after January, after the Battle of Bulge, it's over. And it's because they wanted to hold the Russians off so everybody could get to the Americans and the British. That's the type of an exceptional country we are. And yet the left wants our young people to think that we are the worst thing in the world rather than the best thing that's ever happened to the world. And it's, and I say, we see it in our schools, but we see it over the past week. Over the past week, news came out, emails came out, showing that all of what Joe Biden has been saying about not knowing about his son's corruption is false. He said, well, maybe he was getting $1 million a year to be on this company in Ukraine, which was under investigation for corruption, while I was the point man for the Obama administration and pressuring Ukraine. And, oh, yeah, you do have me on tape, yucking it up about how I got a prosecutor who was prosecuting that company fired, but I knew nothing about it at all, what he was doing. And emails came out. And he also said, and I never met with anybody. I never talked to him about it. I never met with anybody from that company. Emails came out showing that he had met with someone, and that his son had talked with them. And then those weren't the worst emails, despite showing Joe Biden was lying to us, And the worst part of that is that the media is trying to keep that from us. People don't know it. I dare say people watching this broadcast, or some of them will never have heard about it, because I even went to the Wall Street Journal today, and you had to go into about page 14 or 15 before you came across anything about it. And all you came across was an article saying, Republicans upset. About this. I mean, it's the old story that when it comes to Republican corruption, it's on the first page, and the title of the article says Republican corruption. When you come across Democrat corruption, it's on the back page, and the article starts off saying Republicans pounce to talk about. It's the same thing, but it's not the worst part of it. Today, emails came out showing that there were millions of dollars given to the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's brother, Joe Biden's sister-in-law, the children, and then there's a chart that came out.
Yeah, I got that chart too.
Yeah, and the chart says, who's going to own
relatives.
Who's going to own this company? And it said Hunter and Jim Biden, the brother, and Sarah, the sister-in-law, and then it said, and then Joe's going to hold 10% of the company on behalf of the big guy. It's the type of thing that if there was a press here that functioned as it did 50 or 60 years ago, they would be saying to themselves, oh boy, here we go. This is what we want. These are juicy stories. Instead, what happens? Never shows up on CNN, never shows up on ABC. They interviewed Joe Biden last night. George Stephanopoulos does. He doesn't even ask him about it. I mean, he doesn't even ask him about it. And we have Twitter and Facebook taking down accounts that have the audacity to even mention that it's going on. People can look at this and say, oh, you belly aching Republicans, why are you always saying it's not us so much. Look, I'll do well in life. I've done well, and my years are going on here. Certainly, I care about my children, but they're hardworking kids. One's an assistant district attorney, and the other does very, very well in her career, and all. They're doing just fine. My family's doing fine. What I despair over are the voters who are being not allowed to know what they need to know to make a logical and a reasonable decision, an informed decision. Benjamin Franklin, the story goes, when he was leaving the Philadelphia Convention, the last session, if people may not be aware of it, all the sessions had been in secret. They were pledged to allow themselves to speak in candor and all, and then only at the end did they say, here's the product we came up with. And so they had the last session, they voted it, said, okay, this is the reforms that we're looking for, it's indeed is the Constitution we're looking for. And the story goes, a woman, people gathered outside, they knew momentous events were taking place there. And a woman asked him, Dr. Franklin, what kind of government did you give us? And he purportedly said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it.
Right.
And how are the people watching it? How are the people in Ward 9, how are the people in Nashua, in New Hampshire, in this country, going to keep a republic when they're being lied to, when relevant information is being withheld from them, when you see the reaction to anything that comes out about bad for the Democrats, you come up with a narrative. Within 5 minutes, across the country, you have leftists in mainstream publication using the exact phrase. Yeah, this is a very serious situation. It really is. People ought to be outraged on their own behalf.
Right.
Not on my behalf. I mean, not in your behalf, Carl. Not on Republicans' behalf. They ought to be outraged for what is being denied to them.
Right. I think you're very well spoken there. I just hope that the Justice Department has some activity that they're planning soon, because there's a lot of corruption in the government that people don't know. What went through for the last couple of years is hidden from the people, as you say.
So it can be very discouraging, because apparently this laptop has been in the hands of the FBI since December 2019. Now, when I first heard that, and that's clear. There was a subpoena. There's been publication, not in the mainstream media, but there's been publication of the subpoena, and they have the laptop. Now, think of what that means. December 2019, a laptop that talks about Hunter Biden approaching his father on behalf of the officials from Burisma, this oil company, and people in emails from those officials thanking Hunter Biden for setting up the meeting and allowing him to spend time with Joe Biden. That was part of the basis of the impeachment of the president. If you remember, there was that phone call in which the president purportedly said, to the president of Ukraine, President Trump said to the president of Ukraine, you ought to investigate this. And the FBI never gave that information to the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives, quite frankly, a partisan vote, impeached the president. During the trial, never stepped forward to say, oh, by the way, senators, we have this information. You might want to be aware that what the president's concerns were entirely legitimate about the Bidens, that indeed there was some corruption that needed to be investigated. And there is, you can understand the frustration of Donald Trump or anyone who's subject to this.
Definitely. I think the frustrations here with people like you who are running because of what's happened in the last 2 to 4 years. Here in New Hampshire, we have people going in that direction. We have a governor who had to do 57 vetoes one year, and I don't know, a little bit less the next year, but only because people piled the bills together.
That's right. No, I mean, if you go through the litany of really crazy legislation that came out of that session, you wonder, what are you thinking? Just all sorts of new regulations. And it's funny. I've tried to communicate through mailers with the people in Ward 9, and one of the things I've tried to point out to people is that this whole defaming of America as being imbued with systemic racism and systemic misogyny, the hatred of women, and so forth, is used to try to divide us, because the opposition party, the Democrats, try to cobble together aggrieved groups to get a majority vote out of aggrieved groups, but it's just wrong. You know, are there some racists out there? Sure, yeah. Is it a lot less than when we were young, Carl? It is. It is. I mean, in my life, and I think the lives of most people, there's a complete revulsion if anyone were ever to say something racist, and would speak right up. If anyone were to say anything that was anti-Semitic, would speak right up. If anyone were to categorize women as other than full participants in our society, in our politics, in our business, would speak right up. And to say that there's this systemic prejudice is just wrong.
Yeah.
It's defaming and demeaning to our country. A country who's been accused of having institutional racism, even though we elected an African American as president just the right before Trump, and did so gladly. You know, that even folks like me who didn't vote for Barack Obama because I thought, you know, his politics are really to the left, and I'm not so sure they're going to be good for the country, was gladdened by the fact that there was this demonstration that we're no longer a nation of racists. And yet they still call us that way. And we're being called that way by the party of racists, that the party that was built upon slavery, the party that brought our country into a civil war to save slavery, the party that after that civil war enacted Jim Crow laws, segregationist laws throughout the South. The party who when we voted in the 1950s and the 1960s for Civil Rights Acts, voted majority against it. It took Republicans to pass that law. The party that had a president, Lyndon Johnson, who used the N-word to say, well, we're going to now turn to it because we'll get these people who will vote for us now 100 years if we can make them think it was us. That's the party that Donald Trump is saying to him, and everyone should be saying to African American community, they're keeping you on the welfare plantation. Rise up. Just as Booker T. Washington understood that you have, and every immigrant crews understand, you have to pull yourself up in this America. You can do it too.
Yeah, and people don't know about Johnson and how he ran the country. I mean, he was something like they try to describe Trump now. He was a very not clean-mouthed individual when he talked to people. He had all sorts of problems down there in Texas.
You know, Michael Graham from the New Hampshire Journal called me up and after one of Donald Trump's tweets, and I said, you know, sure, the tweets aren't the best thing in the world. Look at his policies. Look at what he's done. Look at who he's appointed, and change his name to Dwight Eisenhower. And it's no different. It's no different. He is a moderately conservative Republican, and yet they say the worst things about him, and they have people believe it. They have people believe it without evidence.
That's
you know?
right.
He's a Nazi, or he's a dictator.
They don't even know what history means.
Yeah. I mean, they pull a guillotine out in front of the White House and say, he's a dictator. You know something I know from history about dictators? They don't like you pulling guillotines up to their house. And they don't let you do that. I mean, it's ridiculous rhetoric. Ridiculous.
Right. Well, you know, we're out of time. Unfortunately, Bill, congratulations on running, and hopefully everything works out right, because we need somebody strong who can change what's happening here as well as the federal group. And we want a strong New Hampshire. We want a New Hampshire that can make choices for himself, who goes and looks at history and sees what was working should be continued, and what wasn't working should be removed.
New Hampshire has to return to the status in New England where all the other states look at it and say, wish we were like New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's right.
And New Hampshire doesn't wish they were like Massachusetts.
Right, definitely.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for listening in. And please get out to vote. We need you to vote. And I hope you're voting Republican. We have a lot of good people up there that will help turn this state around. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.